He thought she was dead. He thought he was grieving a ghost. But as Finn Hale sat in his wrecked apartment, staring at a fuzzy local news report from a town 800 miles away, his world shattered for the second time. On the screen, a waitress in a stained uniform was saving a choking child. The camera zoomed in for just 3 seconds. Hollow cheeks, bad haircut, exhausted eyes. But Finn knew those eyes. The coffee cup slipped from his hand and smashed against the floor. Riley? She wasn't dead. She was alive. She was free. And she had left him behind to drown. 30 days to vacate. That's what the eviction notice said, sitting next to the unopened mail and the debt collection notices on Finn's table. His life had been torn apart by a hurricane named Riley Hale. Federal agents had raided his home, his accounts were frozen, and his own family had disowned him. Everyone thought his wife was a fugitive who had died in a car crash. But watching that footage on loop, seeing the efficient, hyper-competent way she moved, Finn felt something cold crystallize in his chest. She was in Sterling Falls, hiding, while he faced the consequences alone. His phone buzzed for the 7th time that morning. He didn't need to look to know it was another debt collector. Riley's legal fees, the lawyers he'd hired to prove she was innocent, to find her, to do something, had drained their joint accounts before the bank had frozen everything. His own firm had let him go 2 months ago. Conflict of interest, they'd called it. Though everyone knew the real reason. No one wanted the husband of a fugitive handling their contracts. The apartment looked like it had been torn apart by a hurricane, because it had been. Federal agents executing a search warrant, looking for evidence that Finn was helping Riley hide. They'd found nothing, because there was nothing to find. His wife had vanished without a trace, without a word, without even the courtesy of letting him know she was about to destroy his entire existence. His mother hadn't returned his calls in 6 weeks. His brother had sent a single text, "You made your choice. Don't contact us again." As if he'd chosen this, as if he'd known. The TV droned in the background, local news from some nowhere town 800 miles away. He wasn't really watching it, just letting the noise fill the crushing silence of the apartment. And now, a heartwarming story from Sterling Falls. A local waitress is being hailed as a hero after saving a child from choking at the Beacon Diner. Finn reached for his coffee, the cup already cold. On screen, shaky cell phone footage showed the inside of a run-down diner. A woman in a stained uniform performed the Heimlich maneuver with practiced precision, dislodging something from a toddler's throat while the mother screamed. The crowd erupted in applause as the child started crying, the good kind of crying, the alive kind. The camera zoomed in as the woman tried to wave off the attention, turning away from the lens. But for just 3 seconds, her face filled the screen. Hollow cheeks, shortened hair badly cut, exhausted eyes that once sparkled with ambition and love. The coffee cup slipped from Finn's hand and shattered against the hardwood floor, ceramic shards skittering across the room like his fragmenting sanity. "Riley?" His voice came out strangled, disbelieving. He lunged for the remote, rewinding the footage, watching it again and again. The way she moved, controlled, efficient, that same hyper-competence that had made her a rising star in corporate security. The tilt of her head when she smiled awkwardly at the grateful mother. The unconscious gesture of tucking hair behind her left ear, even though the hair was now too short to tuck. The caption at the bottom of the screen read, "Jess Ryan, waitress at the Beacon Diner, Sterling Falls." Finn's hands shook as he grabbed his laptop, fingers fumbling over the keys. Sterling Falls, population 4,200, middle of nowhere, the kind of town where a person could disappear if they wanted to, if they were running, if they had abandoned their husband to face the consequences alone. The screen showed Riley, Jess, whoever she was now, waving off a reporter, disappearing into the diner's back room. Alive, healthy, free, while he drowned. Finn sat back, staring at the frozen image of his wife's face, and felt something cold and terrible crystallize in his chest, where love used to be. If you're already hooked by this story, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss what happens next, because what Finn does in the next 60 seconds will change everything. Drop a comment and tell me, would you turn someone you love if they destroyed your life? I want to know what you think. Now, let's see what choice Finn makes. Episode 2, The Choice. Detective Eva Cruz's business card sat on the table next to the eviction notice, edges worn from where Finn had been turning it over in his hands for the past 2 hours. He'd found it stapled to the police report from Riley's staged death, the car they'd pulled from the river, burned beyond recognition, dental records that somehow matched, even though there'd been no body to bury. His finger hovered over his phone screen, Cruz's number already dialed but not yet called. One button, one choice, the difference between justice and complicity, between survival and drowning alongside her. On the mantel across the room, their wedding photo stared at him with accusatory joy. Riley in white, laughing at something he'd whispered. Finn in his tuxedo, looking at her like she hung the moon. He should have taken it down months ago, boxed it up with all the other lies, but every time he reached for it, his hands wouldn't cooperate. "She left me to die," he whispered to the empty apartment, trying the words on for size, seeing if they felt true. They did. God help him, they did. His mother's last voicemail played in his memory. "You're choosing her over your own family. Don't call here again." His brother's text, his former partner at the firm, quietly suggesting Finn might want to take some time before the clients started asking questions. The debt collectors, the frozen accounts, the federal investigation that painted him as either an accomplice or a fool. All because Riley Hale had decided to play hero without bothering to tell him the game had started. His thumb pressed the call button before he could change his mind. It rang twice. "Cruz? Detective Cruz? My name is Finn Hale. I was Riley Hale's husband." A pause, shuffling papers. "Mr. Hale, I'm sorry for your loss. She's not dead. I know where Riley is." The beacon's lights flickered as Jess wiped down the last table, her lower back screaming from 8 hours on her feet. The night shift tips sat crumpled in her apron pocket, $43 and change, barely enough for another week in the motel room that smelled like mildew and broken dreams. Dottie sat in her usual booth, nursing her decaf and working through a crossword puzzle with arthritic fingers. She'd been coming in every Thursday for the past 2 months, always ordering the same thing, always leaving exactly 15%. She reminded Riley of her grandmother, the one who died before she could see Riley's corporate success, before everything had fallen apart. "You headin' out, honey?" Dottie asked, looking up as Jess untied her apron. "Yeah, long night." "Every night's long when you're carrying the weight of the world. I've been watching you, Jess. You move like someone running from something, or toward something. Can't quite figure which." Riley's hands stilled on her apron strings. "Just tired, Dottie." "Tired's one thing, haunted's another." The old woman reached across the table and patted Jess's hand with papery fingers. "Whatever it is you're running from, sweetheart, I hope it's worth what it's costing you." Riley smiled sadly, the expression not quite reaching her eyes. "Me too." She walked out into the cold night air, pulling her threadbare jacket tight, and wondered if Finn was sleeping soundly in their penthouse bed, if he'd moved on, if he ever thought about her anymore. 800 miles away, Finn ended his call with Detective Cruz and stared at their wedding photo until dawn broke through the windows. Neither of them slept that night.
Detective Eva Cruz drove into Sterling Falls just after sunrise, the kind of tired town where the welcome sign was sun-bleached and half the storefronts on Main Street had "for lease" signs in the windows. She'd been chasing white-collar criminals for 15 years, and she'd learned that people who ran always made the same mistake. They chose places like this, thinking anonymity meant safety. She started with the gas station, showing Riley Hale's photo to the attendant, then the grocery store, the laundromat, the post office. No one recognized her, or if they did, small-town loyalty kept them quiet. Cruz was patient. She'd learned patience from her father, who'd spent 30 years as a detective before a bullet retired him. The guilty always slip eventually. You just have to be there when they do. The Beacon Diner sat at the end of Main Street, its neon sign buzzing in the gray morning light. Cruz pushed through the door, bell chiming overhead, and slid into a booth with a clear view of the counter. She ordered coffee from a waitress who looked like she'd been working there since the Carter administration. Then she waited. Jess Ryan emerged from the back room 20 minutes later, tying her apron, hair pulled into a messy ponytail. Cruz studied her over the rim of her coffee cup. The hair was different, shorter, badly cut. The clothes were wrong, thrift store instead of designer. But the way she moved, efficient and controlled, the way she scanned the room before approaching tables, assessing threats. "Refill?" Jess asked, coffee pot in hand, smile professionally bland. Cruz held out her cup. "Please." Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. Cruz watched Jess's pupils dilate, watched the micro-expression of recognition flash across her face before training locked it down. "You look familiar. Have we met before?" Jess's hand was steady as she poured, but Cruz saw the white-knuckle grip on the pot handle. "I just have one of those faces." Cruz smiled, the expression not quite reaching her eyes. "Maybe." She left a 20 on the table for a $4 cup of coffee and walked out into the morning light, pulling out her phone to call for backup. Behind her, through the diner window, she watched Jess Ryan stand frozen at the counter, staring at the door like she was watching her entire world collapse. Because she was.
Riley's hands shook as she dialed Zero's number from the burner phone, locked in the diner's bathroom stall. 3 rings. 4. Finally. "Yeah?" "We're out of time. Upload everything tonight." Silence on the other end. Then, "The files aren't fully verified yet. If we release now, defense lawyers could tear them apart. We need at least 3 more days to... tonight." Riley pressed her forehead against the cold metal stall divider. "Or it never happens." What happened? Did someone... A cop just made me in the diner. I don't know how, I don't know who talked, but she knows. By tomorrow, they'll have this place surrounded. By tomorrow, I'm in federal custody, and those files become evidence in my trial, instead of proof of what Marcus did. Do you understand? Tonight is all we have. Zero exhaled slowly. If this goes wrong, then we tried. But if we don't try, all those people, Melissa, the trafficking victims, everyone Marcus sold out, they disappear, like they never mattered, like their lives were just collateral damage in someone else's profit margin. Another pause. Then, "I'll need 4 hours, maybe 5. You have 3. After that, I'm gone." Riley ended the call and stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Jess Ryan looked back at her, terrified, trapped, running out of moves. But Riley Hale had 1 play left. The motel room smelled like cigarette smoke and regret. wallpaper peeling in long strips that reminded Riley of dead skin. She moved quickly, methodically, packing the duffel bag with the essentials she'd learned to live with: 2 changes of clothes, toiletries, the burner phones, $500 in small bills taped inside a paperback novel. Everything she owned fit in one bag, everything she'd become reduced to what she could carry. Her hand paused on the false bottom of the duffel, fingers tracing the outline of the photograph she'd hidden there 3 months ago. She shouldn't have kept it. Keeping it was sentimental and stupid, the kind of mistake that got people caught. But some nights, when the motel walls closed in and Jess Ryan felt more real than Riley Hale, she'd pull it out and remember who she used to be. The photo showed 2 people on a beach in Santorini, sun-drunk and laughing. Finn had his arms wrapped around her waist, her head thrown back in genuine joy. They'd been married for 6 days. The world had still made sense. Riley held the photo over the rust-stained sink, her lighter's flame dancing in the darkness. The corner caught first, curling and blackening. Finn's face disappeared into ash, then hers. The people they'd been turning to smoke and floating away into nothing. She watched until there was nothing left but residue in the sink, then watched it down the drain with water that ran cold and metallic. No more looking back. Detective Cruz sat in her rental car outside the Sterling Falls police station, laptop balanced on her steering wheel, reading the background report that had just come through. Jessica Ryan. No prior employment history, no tax records before 3 months ago, social security number flagged as recently issued. The ID itself was clean. Professional work, probably cost a few thousand, but the person behind it was a ghost. She dialed her supervisor. "It's her. I need a tactical team, 4 officers minimum, vests, the works." "You sure about this, Eva? That's a lot of resources for a white-collar case." "I have got 12 million reasons to run and nothing left to lose. I'm sure. We move at dawn. I want her boxed in before she knows we're there." "You got it. The team will be there by 5 a.m. Cruz ended the call and settled in to watch the motel across the street where Jess Ryan, Riley Hale, had been living. The light in room 7 was still on. Cruz wondered what fugitives thought about in their last hours of freedom. Regret? Defiance? Or just the mechanical calculus of survival? She'd know soon enough. Finn's hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles had gone white somewhere around hour 3. He'd been driving through the night, mainlining gas station coffee and ignoring the voice in his head that kept asking what the hell he was doing. He'd made the call. He'd given Cruz the location. His part was done. He should be home, should be starting the process of rebuilding his life now that Riley would finally face consequences for what she'd done. But he couldn't stop seeing her face on that news footage, exhausted, hollowed out, running. He couldn't stop hearing her voice from their last real conversation. "I love you, more than anything." 3 days before she'd vanished and left him to burn. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, broken white lines disappearing under his headlights like a countdown. Sterling Falls, 47 miles. Dawn was still 3 hours away. The tactical team wouldn't move until then. He didn't know what he'd say when he saw her, didn't know if he wanted to scream or beg for answers, or just understand how the woman he'd loved could destroy him so completely. But he needed to see her face when they came for her, needed her to know it was him who'd made the call, needed her to carry that weight the way he'd been carrying hers. The speedometer crept past 80 as the miles disappeared beneath him. Dawn broke over Sterling Falls like a wound, all crimson and bruised purple bleeding across the horizon. Riley stepped out of the motel room into air so cold it burned her lungs, duffel bags slung over her shoulder, 3 hours of fitful sleep still clinging to her consciousness. Zero had confirmed the upload at 4 a.m. The files were live, distributed across 12 servers in 8 countries, with dead man's switches that would trigger automatic releases if she didn't check in every 24 hours. She'd won. Even if they caught her now, the truth would come out. She made it 3 steps toward the parking lot before the world exploded into red and blue lights. "Riley Hale, stop! Put your hands where we can see them." Detective Cruz's voice boomed through a megaphone, amplified and inescapable. Unmarked cars materialized from every angle, behind the diner, blocking the street, flanking the motel parking lot like a noose pulled tight. Officers in tactical gear emerged, weapons drawn, creating a perimeter that made running impossible. Riley froze, every muscle in her body screaming to flee, even as her brain calculated the futility. Slowly, deliberately, she raised her hands above her head, the duffel bag dropping to the asphalt with a sound like a judge's gavel. That's when she saw the sedan pulling up to the barricade at the far end of the parking lot. Dark blue, out-of-state plates. The driver's door opened, and Finn Hale stepped out, looking like he'd aged a decade in 3 months, his suit wrinkled, his tie missing, his face gaunt and gray in the early morning light. But his eyes, those eyes she'd looked into on their wedding day, were fixed with her an expression that shattered what was left of her heart. Their gazes locked across 50 yards of cracked asphalt and police barricade. Time seemed to suspend itself, the world narrowing to just the 2 of them and everything they'd lost. Understanding crashed over Riley like ice water, the detective finding her so quickly, the timing so perfect and so brutal. "It was you," she mouthed, barely a whisper, but somehow she knew he could read her lips the way he'd always been able to read her thoughts. Finn didn't look away, didn't flinch, just stood there with his devastation on full display, letting her see exactly what her choices had cost him. Detective Cruz approached cautiously, weapon drawn but pointed at the ground, movements professional and precise. "On your knees, hands behind your head, do it slowly." Riley obeyed, gravel biting into her knees through her jeans, but her voice, when she spoke, was steady, calm, the voice of the woman who once commanded boardrooms and built digital fortresses. "I'll surrender, but first you need to hear the truth." Cruz stopped 5 feet away. "You can tell it to your lawyer, Miss Hale. The files went live 2 hours ago." Riley kept her eyes on Cruz, but her words were for everyone. The officers, the gathering crowd of locals, the news van that had somehow already arrived. And for Finn, still frozen at the barricade. $12 million in embezzled funds, 3 years of evidence documenting a criminal data trafficking operation, names, dates, transactions. Senator Harrison's daughter, the kidnapping case from October 2022 that went cold. The kidnappers bought encrypted communications from my company. That's how they stayed invisible. Cruz's expression shifted, doubt creeping in at the edges. "That's a hell of a story." "It's not a story. It's a confession. Everything I did to expose them, and now you can either arrest me for the crimes I admit to committing, or you can listen to why I had no other choice." Finn made a sound then, something between a gasp and a sob. But Riley couldn't look at him. If she looked at him now, she'd break.
"Start talking," Cruz said, holstering her weapon but keeping her hand near it. "And this better be good." Riley took a breath that felt like swallowing glass. "My company, Brennan Security Systems, provides encrypted communications platforms for Fortune 500 companies, government contractors, high net worth individuals. I was the director of corporate security. My job was to make sure the systems were impenetrable. 4 months ago, during a routine audit, I found a back door. Someone had created a pipeline to siphon user data, not bulk data, but surgical extractions, specific targets, high-value individuals. That's corporate espionage, not... The data was being sold to criminal networks." Riley's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. "Human traffickers, organized crime syndicates, anyone willing to pay. October 2022, Senator Harrison's 15-year-old daughter, Alexis, was kidnapped from her private school.
The kidnappers knew her security details, communication protocols, her driver's routes, even the panic codes. You couldn't track them because they had military-grade encryption. Cruz's face went pale. I worked that case. We recovered her, but we never found who. They bought it from my company for $2.3 million, transferred through a shell corporation in the Caymans. I have the transaction records, the communications logs, everything. How do you know this? Because I built the security system they corrupted. Every backdoor, every vulnerability they exploited, I designed the architecture they twisted. When I discovered it, I went to my CEO, Marcus Brennan. He told me to drop it. 2 hours later, he made a phone call. We have a problem. Riley Hale knows. So you decided to steal $12 million. I needed leverage. I needed insurance. And I needed to disappear long enough to gather evidence that would hold up in court. The $12 million, that's their money. Profits from 3 years of selling people's lives. I took it to make them bleed the way their victims bled. Behind the barricade, Finn broke. He stumbled forward, pushing past an officer who tried to stop him, nearly tripping over the yellow police tape. You could have told me. His voice cracked across the parking lot, raw and shredded. We could have gone to the police together. We could have figured it out. Instead, you destroyed my entire life, my career, my family, my reputation, and you never even gave me a choice. Riley finally looked at him, and the pain in her eyes was bottomless. They killed my assistant, Finn. The parking lot went silent. Melissa Chen. Riley's voice broke for the first time. 3 days after I told her what I'd found, she was found hanging in her apartment, 28 years old. The police ruled it suicide. Tears tracked down her face, cutting through the exhaustion and grime. I saw the crime scene photos. I saw what they did to make it look like she did it herself. If they knew you knew, if I'd told you anything, you'd be dead too. Finn stopped moving, 10 feet away, his face crumpling. I was protecting you. By destroying us, I kept you alive. That's the only choice I had. The black SUV came from nowhere, tires screaming as it crashed through the police barricade. 2 more vehicles followed, boxing in the scene from opposite angles. Men in tactical gear poured out. Not police. Wrong uniforms, wrong movements, weapons raised and trained on Riley. Nobody move. The lead operative's voice was cold, professional, his weapon pointed directly at Riley's chest. Miss Hale, the drive, now. Detective Cruz's hand flew to her holster. Identify yourselves. Private security. Stand down, detective. This is a corporate matter. Everything clicked into place in Cruz's mind. The way Riley had been running, the desperation, the truth in her eyes. Officers, weapons up. These men are not law enforcement. Chaos erupted. The tactical officers swung their weapons toward the operatives. Civilians screamed and scattered. Cruz stepped in front of Riley, her body a shield, her weapon trained on the lead operative. You're making a mistake, detective. Walk away. This doesn't concern you. Federal crimes concern me. Lower your weapons or I will drop you where you stand. Riley's internal thought, desperate calculation. Her phone was still in her jacket pocket. If she could just reach it, activate the final dead man switch early, ensure everything uploaded immediately. Riley, don't! Finn's voice cut through the standoff. Then he was moving, sprinting from behind the barricade directly toward the operative's blind side, arms waving. Stop! Stop! She doesn't have anything! The operative pivoted toward Finn, weapon tracking. In that split second of distraction, Riley lunged for her phone, fingers flying across the screen. 1 button, 1 confirmation. The upload bar filled green. Freeze! Drop your weapons, now! Federal agents materialized from unmarked vehicles, FBI vests, weapons drawn. The operatives realized too late they were surrounded, outgunned. One by one, their weapons clattered to the pavement. The lead operative stared at Riley with murder in his eyes as federal agents forced him to his knees. Cruz turned to Riley, who stood trembling, phone still clutched in her hand. It's done. Everything's uploaded. Every transaction, every victim, every name. It's over.
6 months later, the headlines told the story Riley couldn't speak about until the trials ended. Multi-billion-dollar data trafficking ring dismantled. 47 arrests in international criminal conspiracy. Tech executive turned whistleblower testifies in landmark case. Marcus Brennan got 25 years, the company dissolved, and 200 victims, people who'd been trafficked, blackmailed, or worse, finally got justice. Riley stood on a beach in Northern California, the ocean wind pulling at her hair. Grown out now, professional again, different. She wore jeans and a simple sweater. No longer Jess Ryan, but not quite Riley Hale either. Someone in between. Someone rebuilt. She heard footsteps on the sand and knew without turning it was Finn. They stood side by side, not touching, watching the waves crash against the rocks. He looked better, the gauntness gone, replaced by something harder but healthier. He'd been cleared of all charges, reinstated at his firm, even made partner. Life had moved on for him. Can we ever go back? Finn asked, his voice barely audible over the surf. Riley shook her head, tears she refused to shed burning behind her eyes. No, but maybe we can go forward, separately. He nodded, having already known the answer. I'm sorry I turned you in. I'm sorry I didn't trust you enough to tell you the truth. She finally looked at him. We both made choices we can't take back. I loved you. I think I still do, but I don't know if that matters anymore. It matters. It just isn't enough. They stood in silence for a moment longer, two people who'd survived something that broke them both, then turned and walked in opposite directions along the beach. No goodbye, no final embrace, just the weight of might have been settling between them, like sand. 3 days later, Riley walked through the glass doors of the FBI's San Francisco field office. Her new badge caught the fluorescent light. Special Consultant, Financial Crimes Division, Riley Hale. She'd found her redemption in bringing down the people who'd corrupted her life's work. But the woman she'd been, the one who'd laughed on a beach in Santorini, who'd believed love could survive anything, that woman was gone. Some things, once broken, could never be made whole again. Riley walked past her reflection in the glass and didn't look back. If this story touched you in any way, made you think, made you feel, or reminded you that everyone deserves fairness, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Share your thoughts in the comments too. I love reading your perspective. And don't forget to follow, because I've got more beautiful stories coming. Stories that speak to the heart and remind us why kindness still matters. Subscribe if you believe in equality and fairness. The ones who don't, well, they're the only ones who won't.